to an outsider walking into these classrooms, you would never know the types of things that we were seeing in these students before. These are students who have major behavior issues prior to this year. And now these are students who are leaders in our school, whose academics are increasing every day on every assessment we give them, who are owning their own data, who are setting personal goals behaviorally, socially, with their friends, and academically, obviously. It's just been a tremendous impact, and we're excited to see the long-term growth we have in these students. And it's, the teachers will come to me and say, this is unbelievable. I worked hard at first, but I'm actually working less now because it works. When I think back to where we started, Woodview was the lowest performing school in the district. And now we are, I always tell our staff, we're the dark horse, we are contenders. And in many cases, our outcome, our achievement data is beating the district average, and we're the highest in some areas. And we're not the lowest in any. And so we're always average or above, and in, like I said, in some areas, the highest. And I think that's the point of it all, that what we do and what we change in our adult actions is what leads our learners to a level playing field. So I know without a doubt that the learners in my community can compete on a level with any other community. And that, to me, just speaks volumes.
I would say one of the biggest impacts that visible learning has had on Valley View as a whole is the beliefs that it's started to shift in teachers, in administrators, in district staff. It's a body of research that you can't really argue with, and so it's just kind of internalizing what that research says and taking a good hard look at what we're currently doing, and then going back to the drawing board and looking at some of those best practices and looking at how we can better support student learning in the classroom. And without the belief that this is really what's going to make the best impact for our kids, it's hard to build the house without that foundation. One big change that occurred in Valley View that I really think helped shift the belief of a lot of our educators, we started doing collaborative walkthroughs. And in the past, we would spend a lot of time watching the teacher. But what we did this time was we talked to the kids, and we watched what the kids were doing, and we asked them about their learning and how they would know if they were successful. And then we would put that in front of the teacher. And the impact that it had in helping cement what the teacher thought was currently in place and to bring to light what wasn't currently in place so that they could make some shifts in their practice, that was very different, and it was very safe for the teachers because it was the voice of their kids, and it wasn't evaluative. We didn't put it in front of them and say, this is good or this is bad. We just said, is this what you would want your kids to say when we ask these questions? And that really, they get up every day for those kids. And so to hear the voices of their students and how they felt about their learning in the teacher's class, that has been a huge shift. Another big shift I would say that we've made is how we look at data. For a long time, we would look at data and we would connect excuses to the data. Now we feel charged by the data. We're hungry to get more of it, to see if what we're doing is moving the needle in terms of growth and achievement for our kids. And that's very exciting.
Last year we started into the visible learning. It was kind of our beginning stages, and we were talking about our targets, which we had been doing last year and a little bit the year prior. So there was a lot of focus on our targets, so we would just post our targets, and before every lesson I would go over the targets and I would ask a few kids, what our target was. And I thought, okay, that's great. They all know the target. They're good to go for the lesson. And Jody came in and did a walkthrough while I was with a guided reading group, and she started asking some of the kids what they were learning. And no one could answer the question. No one had any idea what they were learning. And I was floored by that because I thought I posted the target, I was all good. I talked about the target for, I discussed it before we were going to start our lesson, and I thought they were all good with it. So when I attended the professional learning this last summer and we really started to get into visible learning, I really kind of took on that whole, less is more and, know thy impact. And that's when the turn started for me at how much discussion that was really necessary to have in the classroom. I panicked by how much time it was going to take to have the discussions about what we were doing and where we were going, but that difference has been huge. I mean, the kids can tell us what they're learning, why they're learning it, how they know they're learning it. And those are discussions I never did before. And, I own that statement of know thy impact, because it seems like everything we do in the classroom, your job's important, but those discussions especially are huge in the classroom.
There were a lot of teachers that thought, my kids can't do that. My kids can't perform that way. And so to invite them into the process of really understanding that it doesn't matter how old your learners are, it can be done with any kid. And then to see some teachers who were quite resistant to certain ideas actually try those out in the classroom, and then be able to hear what their impact was on their kids, or how they just felt going through the experience, that is fabulous. That is very rewarding. You have to go slow to go fast. This is exciting work, and when we got our hands on the research and we looked at the opportunity in our data, everybody wanted to move very, very quickly. And what we realized is that as ambitious and as noble as those goals were, we weren't ready to go there yet. There was some development and some foundational knowledge that needed to be supported before we could go to the next level. I can think of a building principal who was incredibly patient with her staff as she started to talk about, let's start thinking about success criteria. Let's show the kids what it means to be successful against that learning target. And she had one very resistant teacher, and she patiently encouraged her and dialogued with her, and finally just one day said, would you just try it? Just try it for me, and then let's talk about how it works. And so the teacher did. She tried it. And to quote the principal, the teacher was skipping down the hallway, and she couldn't wait to come into her office and tell her what a fabulous lesson it was when she not only embraced success criteria, but she co-constructed it with her students, and the impact that it had just on the lesson in and of itself, and on the way that kids were able to engage in the learning, was something very different than she was able to see before.
I would say the thing that I learned most from the visible learning journey was that I needed to engage in a growth mindset myself. We've been working very hard on teaching our staff and teaching our students the importance of a growth mindset, but unless a building leader truly engages in that and engages in a culture for error and allows for mistakes for not just their staff and students, but allows mistakes for themselves, there's not going to be as much growth and as much. It goes right back to passionate teachers and inspired teachers. Visible learning helped inspire me because it allowed me to reflect and say, okay, well, this didn't work very well, so let's move on. We're going to make a mistake here, and we're going to learn from those mistakes and keep growing. And I think that's helped with the culture and the climate and moving towards visible learning as a constant in the building.
Some bumps in the road that we would have encountered from a district level is we wanted to make sure that there was autonomy given to the buildings. And I think that if we reflect, there was a little too much autonomy in the beginning. It needed to have a little bit more structure, because what we've discovered as we continue to go on the journey is that if buildings didn't establish a shared language of learning, and they didn't say, when I talk about my learners and when you talk about learners, and we say determination or we say curiosity, do we mean the same thing? Do we look for the same thing? Do we have the same understanding? That has been so pivotal. And for buildings that really did a great job in solidifying that piece at the start of their journey, they're in a better place right now. They're a little more progressed in the work that they're doing with visible learning.
The administrative team at Martinez Middle School conducted walkthroughs of all of our teachers' classrooms throughout the entire first year of our visible learning journey. And we started collecting evidence from students of teacher clarity and their understanding of success criteria by asking them questions of, what are you learning and how will you know that you're being successful? What we found in the beginning of the school year was that our students were able to tell us a little bit about what they were learning, and with about 50% accuracy. And with the success criteria, it was very low. And we anticipated that because we hadn't taught that and we hadn't really focused on that for professional development. As the year progressed and as we kept emphasizing the importance of teacher clarity in the classroom, we started noticing that students were giving us far less compliant answers, and they were really truly understanding the meaning of their instruction, and then they started understanding what steps they were going to take to meet the instructional outcomes as their teachers indicated, either posting it on the board or on their paperwork or verbally stated in class.
You know, it's the data and the conversations tell a story over time. And when you hear teachers talking about it from the perspective of, you know, I'm starting to get it. I'm starting to understand what this is all about. I'm starting to understand what you mean when you talk about analyzing student data so that we can determine whether or not they're learning. And if they are learning, what our steps should be. And if they're not learning, what our next steps should be. So I think for me, it's the shift in the conversations where teachers are less concerned about talking about the day-to-day activities they are involved in, but more so the measurement or the assessment of student learning, whether it's through exit slips or tests or quizzes, summative assessments, looking at that data to determine their impact.
It takes some time, but you will definitely see student change, and I think that's huge, that the students really take ownership of everything that they're doing, and I've seen growth in test results as well. So it's not just them feeling that they're doing more, it's actually being shown through the data, which I think is huge.
One thing that's incredibly exciting for me and for a lot of the members of the team for Valley View is that we have finally started to see a strong correlation between how well our kids are able to articulate what they're learning and how they are going to know they're going to be successful in their learning and their outcome data. And that wasn't present at first because it takes time. It takes time to shift beliefs, to change practice, to develop and support people so that they're really armed with what you're trying to ask them to do. But this year, it's been incredibly exciting because not only do we have a tight linkage between the student voice and the student outcome data, we have, there's not a lot of disparity between how our middle schoolers or our high schoolers can answer the questions. And that to me says that there's something universal getting implemented that's working.
What's next for us here at Brooks is to gain a better understanding of the types of activities, learning experiences kids can be engaged in that are created by the teacher or also mutually created between teacher and student that authentically shows what students are actually thinking. And I think once that their thinking becomes visible and teachers become adept at critiquing on the fly and analyzing students' processes, we're going to be in a much better shape to identify misconceptions, to release students and or classes when they're ready to move forward, but also to catch them when we notice that there are some errors in understanding so that we could clarify those errors or misconceptions to move forward. So I guess from my perspective, I really want to engage the staff in exploration of those best practice instructional strategies or activities where we can have kids engage in this process as often as possible to make their thinking visible so that we could just move to the next level.
Where to next is very pronged because with 21 buildings in our district, everybody is at a little bit of a different place, and some buildings have already kind of partnered up with other buildings who are kind of in that same level of implementation. But for us, from the district perspective, where to next is going to be to continue to develop as many of our staff as we can, to continue to put more soldiers into the schools so that we have more teachers who are armed with what this research says and how it impacts their practice and what it can do for the growth and achievement of their kids. So we're going to kind of start start developing a couple of different layers. We're going to continue to develop some teachers with the visible learning into action, the impact cycles. We're going to continue to support our buildings. Some buildings have decided to go on a different path and actually just capture their whole entire staff through some professional development. And then from a district perspective, we've really tried to focus on teacher clarity. And so for us to begin to kind of go to the next level, we're going to start to put a lot of efforts into the formative assessment process so that we've established that learning target and that teacher clarity, the success criteria. Well, what are we going to now develop? What are the learning activities we're going to create so that we can actually know where our kids are at against that success criteria?